Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here, and today we're talking the best decks for ranked battles going into this last week of the Secluded Springs ranked season. Is anyone still playing ranked mode? I know I am. I know a lot of people probably aren't. They're a little bit tired of this metagame, but for those of you that are still looking to hit Master Ball rank or climb as high as you can in the Master Ball rank, these are going to be the best decks to play for this final week. This metagame, I think a lot of people were a little bit tired of right from the beginning. I just don't think enough changed for a lot of people to be that interested or that invested in this current season, in the Secluded Spring season. We should be getting some announcement of the next expansion, the next update next week, so stay tuned. We'll cover everything, all of the news that comes about Pokemon Pocket or any future updates that we have. But one thing I will say is that I actually think this metagame was a bit underrated. I think a lot of people wrote it off in the first week or two after Suicune was, of course, very dominant, seeing a ton of play. I think a lot of people kind of shied out. They sort of, they either weren't really, entertained, or they didn't love how the metagame was going. But one thing I will say is that the third week, and what I believe the fourth week will be, is actually a very diverse, really fun to play metagame. There's a lot of really viable deck lists. The counter meta came, it developed, and then everything sort of evened out, and we actually have a pretty diverse metagame, especially in ranked battles if you're in Master Ball rank. So anyway, guys, let's dive right into it. And yeah, we're going to be talking about Suicune. Of course, we have to mention it. It is still the driver of the metagame, right? It is the deck list that everybody thinks of. It is the number one deck that is seeing counterplay to it. It is probably the strongest deck, not only this season, but potentially, in the history of Pokemon Pocket. Quite honestly, it's got everything. It's got Suicune, it's got Greninja, it's got Cyrus, it's got Irida, it's got Giratina. It's got a little bit of everything going on. This is a list from a recent tournament that was the highest placing Suicune deck of that tournament. I do believe that it's still a quality option. At this point, it still is. You either play it, Suicune Greninja, or you're playing decks that, can do well into Suicune Greninja. And that's why I call it the meta driver deck list. I don't think much has changed. I think, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of wiggle room for how people play Suicune. I think really people settled onto Giratina quite early because it really was the best way to play it. And it hasn't changed a whole lot since then. I do think that 2 copies of Cyrus kind of went away for a little bit, but I still feel like the 2 copies of Cyrus makes a lot of sense for the deck list. It's your primary win condition. I think that 2 copies of Cyrus, 2 copies of Irida is in general correct. So we've kind of gone back to more of a standard list here. We are playing 2 Pokeball, 2 Research, 1 Giant Cape, 2 Rare Candy, but the other, I would say the 19th and 20th cards of the deck would be the Mars and the Silver. And you could swap those cards out, but I think Disruption is still valuable when you're playing Suicune. Silver and Mars are just incredibly good cards in their own right. So, yes, this is, a deck list that has seen a lot of play, but also has been countered pretty heavily, and is not nearly as dominant of a deck as it was early on in the season. For those of you who haven't played a lot of ranked battles over the last week or so, honestly, I would say the vast majority of decks are not Suicune, in Master Ball tier at least. And I think that that is definitely healthy, but it really does go to show that most people are either tired of playing Suicune or are just really trying to counterplay it. And I think that actually creates a pretty diverse metagame, and it's really going to be the main reason why all of the other decks in this video are, of course, being showcased and recommended to you. So here's Suicune and Greninja. We had to talk about it. It's still here. Spoiler, we are not putting Giratina Darkrai on the tier list. I still think Giratina Darkrai is a strong deck list, but I really don't think that it's like a top deck right now. I think that it's, it has some merit into Suicune, but to be honest, a lot of the decks that we're going to talk about today are actually quite good into Giratina Darkrai, and it's fallen off in play dramatically. Its performances in recent online tournaments, although it did win the past week, or last weekend's Jody's tournament, I don't really, consider Giratina Darkrai a top deck currently in this format, at least if you're playing in ranked battles. The deck list is slow, and there's a lot of decks, there's a lot of Oricorio, there's a lot of things floating around that really Giratina Darkrai doesn't love to go into. So, if you're playing in a tournament, sure, I think Giratina Darkrai can always win. It's definitely a strong choice, but it wouldn't really be high up on my list for ranked battles. But anyway, Suicune Greninja, still really strong. We have to mention it. Next up is actually going to be Silvally Giratina. So this is a deck list that we've talked about quite a bit over the last few days. I know some people don't love this deck. They don't love the idea of it, right? How original is it to just play Silvally and Giratina together? I know it sounds a little bit of a drag, but this deck list is actually really strong. It's extremely well positioned. It's not like it's a new deck by any stretch of the imagination. This particular strategy has been around for quite some time, but currently right now in the metagame, it's extremely well positioned. We made a video specifically about this deck yesterday where we got very unlucky, but we went live last night on playing ranked battles. We went live on YouTube and on Twitch. Shout out to everybody that joined the live stream. We did exceedingly well. We gained about almost 300 points in Master Ball on the within like 3 hours on the ranked ladder. It's just a very well positioned deck list. It does good basically into everything. Going first, we have Mantike and Giratina. Going second, we have Silvally. And the cool thing about Silvally is, especially if you go second and you can get it out in your second turn, if you don't bench anything else, your opponent's Suicune can't really contend with it. It's kind of funny. And if they don't have Irida or Giant Cape, or if we draw red, we can pretty easily take a KO on our second turn into Suicune. It's a really strong deck. It's just very well positioned currently in the metagame. If you're not playing Suicune, you're probably playing like Guzzlord, which, Silvally does really well into, as well as Dragonite, right? We can kind of force our opponent to have to KO us 3 times, and Guzzlord and Dragonite doesn't really love that. And then all of the lightning type counterplay decks, right? Are also just things that don't really love this particular strategy. I really like this deck. It's actually a lot more fun than you might think. At least for me, it's really fun just because, it's very linear in terms of like knowing what you have to do. But there's still a lot of really important decisions to be made. And I actually like people don't love this metagame. They don't love the whole Suicune stuff, but like my experience playing against Suicune can be frustrating at times, but it's actually a pretty engaging experience. I know I might be really one of the only people that thinks that, but I actually really do I like playing against Suicune. I actually find it to be quite fun. And overall, I've had a really good experience in this metagame, from the third week on, honestly. I think it's actually ended up being pretty fun in my mind. So a really strong deck. I don't know really what else to say. Now, some people have asked me, what about like just 2 Giratina? Why are we playing Mantike? You could play any baby Pokemon in place of Mantike. Of course, this deck plays only Psychic Energies, which is actually a really big advantage to play Giratina in a deck playing Psychic Energies. We can actually just attack with Chaotic Impact, Giratina EX on our third turn, which not a lot of decks can do, and not a lot of decks can actually stand up to that Giratina, especially if we have red in hand. We can hit for 150 on turn 3. It's really strong. It honestly is. And again, it's not oftentimes that we really want to lead Giratina. I would say most of the time where it's preferred for us to just lead Silvally, which is why I believe that just playing 1 Giratina is probably correct. And then Mantike, of course, is a very low impact Pokemon. Most of the time, your opponent's going to be forced to not target Mantike. They're going to have to go through your Silvallies. But that's a big strength of the deck, is that Mantike, even if you do go second, it doesn't really matter that much, because we can still bench a type nil, attach, and then retreat in, and then get that quick blow off. The attack name is Quick Blow. Anyway, so I actually really like the Mantike stuff. I think that Giratina is fine, but I just haven't really found that needing 2 of them makes much sense to me at all. The things you could change here in the deck list are the Team Rocket Grunt, the Giant Cape there, and the Mars. So what I did on stream is I changed the deck a little bit, and I was actually playing double Rocky Helmet. I just feel like Rocky Helmet is a little bit more valuable than Giant Cape in most scenarios, so I think 2 Rocky Helmet actually makes more sense. This deck list is playing 2 copies of Mars, and I know some people might think that's weird, but quite frankly, Mars is a card that always, is fine to play, right? There's going to be times where your opponent has 2-3 cards in hand, but at the end of the day, playing Mars means that your opponent doesn't always know what's going to be in their hand, which is a valuable thing in general, and it also, of course, boosts the damage of Brave Buddies, whereas some other supporter cards are a little bit more situational, and we don't always have the ability to play them. Things like Sabrina and Cyrus aren't sometimes cards that you want to play, right? Sometimes you don't want to gust up your opponent. You just want to hit the active, but you need to play a supporter, so I like the 2 copies of Mars. You could swap one of those Mars for something like a Silver, allow you to potentially take some of those cards out of your opponent's hand. Specifically, like Irida when you're playing Suicune can be really annoying, but also Cyrus, right, in a lot of different scenarios. That's a major win condition. So maybe you swap a Mars for a for a Silver. That's definitely an option. And then the Team Rocket Grunt, I actually kind of like Team Rocket Grunt just because it has the potential to kind of just win you games sometimes. There's very few cards that can do that. It's like just, attacking with Guzzlord, how Guzzlord sometimes can flip like 5 heads and then you lose. Team Rocket Grunt has that potential. I recently swapped out the Grunt, though, for a Sabrina. I just feel like Sabrina is still really good in the format. It's also a supporter card, so that's kind of what I've been doing, but, you can change around this deck list a little bit. I do really like the double Silvally, single baby Pokemon, and single Giratina. Just a really, really strong deck. I don't know if it's like... it might not be the most obvious deck in the world, like how to play it, but we have a lot of gameplay, and I think that we've been doing a pretty good job with it. So if you're curious about this deck list, or if you really want to play it, I would recommend you go check out the live stream, recording, or the video where we play this deck list. Because honestly, I think that as far as any decks go right now, at least in ranked battles, this is probably one of the more well-positioned deck lists. It's fast-paced, it's consistent, definitely has, in my mind, above a 50% win rate, so you can climb very consistently with this deck. We went on a bunch of win streaks last night. It's just a really strong option right now, currently in the metagame. I would highly recommend it. So there we go. Next up is going to be Skarmory. So some people have kind of joked about Skarmory a little bit. I think Skarmory is just in a weird, unique position to where it's actually pretty good into Suicune, but it's good into a lot of different stuff. The cool thing about Skarmory is that it can actually operate pretty well with only a single Pokemon in the active spot, similarly to how we play that Silvally deck list, right? But on the flip side, Skarmory takes reduced damage, right? With things like Jasmine, and of course, with its the Steel Wing attack actually also reduces the damage. We're playing Rocky Helmet instead of Steel Apron. Some people have asked me about that. I actually feel like Rocky Helmet is better. Steel Apron theoretically, of course, will further reduce the damage, but it's not that big of an issue with Skarmory. I think the main issue is the amount of damage that we're able to deal, and Rocky Helmet kind of fixes some of that math. That's also why we're playing one copy of Red in the deck list. So I really like Skarmory. I actually think that it does well into Suicune, but it does really well into a lot of those lightning type deck lists that don't deal a lot of damage. And Skarmory's not weak to lightning, it's weak to fire, which I didn't really know until recently. Yeah, shout out to Skarmory. Actually, a very uniquely well-positioned deck currently in the metagame. And again, I think that, it's interesting, right? I try to tell people every time that at the end of the season, certain decks sort of pop up and they become just better than they ever were before, just because of, how the metagame ends up unfolding. Things like Skarmory is just one example of that. And I know that some people might not be fully invested, or they might not fully believe in Skarmory, but out of all of the deck lists in today's video, or in the current format right now to play for ranked battles, I think that Skarmory is actually a really, really good choice. So if you're an enjoyer of Skarmory, if you wanted to play a metal type deck for once in the history of Pokemon Pocket, I guess Solgaleo, is a deck list, but actually I would definitely rather play Skarmory right now than Solgaleo. Either way, Metal is definitely more of a rare type in terms of meta deck lists, so this is a fun deck. It's definitely not something that we typically see in the metagame, but is definitely well positioned currently. Next up is going to be Silvally Zeraora. So this is another more specific deck list that counters Suicune, but very similarly to the Giratina deck list, a single Silvally or a Zeraora in the active spot early in the game can really turn the tides. Very similar here to the Giratina Silvally deck list. It's very simple, very straightforward. The upside to Zeraora is that it's actually good going first, and there's very few cards that can do that. This deck list is constructed very similarly to the Giratina Silvally deck list, right? Mantike and Giratina are strong cards going first. They just provide a little bit of a different type of value than Zeraora does, but Zeraora is also a strong going first option, and then of course Silvally. So it's all about being strong into Suicune. Every deck in this video is either Suicune or decks that are just inherently strong into Suicune. This isn't a deck that I think is like overwhelmingly strong, right? In a tournament setting, we see this deck do well quite often, and the main reason for that is just because of that Suicune matchup, but against most other things in the format, I think you're going to struggle. I wanted to include this deck because it's Silvally, and I think that Silvally is uniquely well positioned currently in the metagame, but I also feel like it made sense to include this version of Silvally in this video as well, because Suicune, although it's not the only deck you're going to hit in Master Ball, it is definitely probably the most common deck that you're going to hit, right? So it is definitely still worth it to heavily consider playing a deck that specifically counters Suicune, which I think this deck list does, and honestly, just Silvally can win you a lot of games, so definitely a quality deck list, one of my favorites, yeah. Not a bad deck whatsoever, and I think it's actually crazy how many decks are strong into Suicune. Like, I think at the beginning of the season, people really assumed that Suicune would just completely run away with things, but for anybody that, again, hasn't played over the last few weeks, I mean, there's so many decks that actually have winning matchups into Suicune. Suicune still survives just because none of those matchups are like auto wins, which is, the inherent strength of Suicune, but yeah, there's a lot of options. It's kind of wild. I don't know if anybody really thought that would be the case, but yeah, I mean, tons and tons of decks are actually strong into Suicune. What's also crazy here is how many of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. What's up with that? No, I'm just kidding. Listen, 58.9% of you guys that have been watching my content over the last month are not subscribed to the channel. And listen, I'm not going to beg you guys to hit the subscribe button, but I just wanted to let you know that if you do hit that subscribe button, I appreciate it. It supports me, and we're making content almost every day here on the channel about Pokemon Pocket, about the metagame, about different deck lists. So, it's free. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button if you want to. There you go. I have to mention it in the video. Next up is going to be Raikou and Tapu Koko. Really my favorite deck so far this season. It really is a deck that has a little bit of everything. I think that Raikou was dramatically underestimated going into the season. I wish that it caught on a little bit earlier. If a deck list like this became exceedingly popular at the beginning of the metagame, then we wouldn't have a whole bunch of Suicunes and Giratina Darkrai and Guzzlords really dominating in that first couple of weeks. But no, I really feel like this deck list has a lot going for it. Electrical Cord is an exceedingly powerful card. That tool card can single-handedly win you games. Really, the only hard counter to this deck in particular, I would say, is probably just playing Guzma. That's literally the only way to consistently beat this deck list. If you don't Guzma, it's very likely that you're going to have to go through, a Zeraora or two, and then a Pikachu, or a Raikou EX and a Pikachu EX. And that 150 for Pikachu is a lot of damage. It really does add up. The Cyrus combo with the Voltaic Bullet attack, from Raikou, which deals bench damage, allows us to, gust up certain Pokemon. Tapu Koko is an exceedingly strong lead-off Pokemon into Suicune in a variety of other matchups, right? To be 100% honest with you. Double Elemental Switch is really fun. This deck list has so many different routes. There's so many different decisions to make when you're playing this deck, and it has a good matchup into Suicune. Kind of my original counter meta deck that I really brought into the metagame into that second week and had a tremendous win rate in my 4 or 5 days of starting to play this deck going into the second week. And honestly, it's caught on a little bit. It's been continuing to do well in tournaments, but is far from the most popular deck of the format. Still a deck that I would highly recommend. 2 copies of Repel. Shout out to Repel. Still an incredible card into Suicune, and just a really strong card in general this season. This deck list here, I think, is one of my favorite decks. And I think a big reason why I like this deck list is because it feels very strong. It feels very fun to play, but it doesn't feel exceedingly overpowered, right? It doesn't feel like I'm cheating and I'm breaking the metagame when I play this deck list. It just feels like I have the opportunity to win any game I play, and there's so many different routes and opportunities when I'm playing this deck, and really any matchup. So one of my favorite decks really in the history of Pokemon Pocket. I think Raikou is a really, really fun card. Tapu Koko and Pikachu, very good so far this season. And Zeraora, shout out to Zeraora, doing really well. Just happens to be a card that has been included in a lot of different decks, mainly just because it does better. It's a better option when you're going against Suicune than maybe other lightning type decks like Oricorio or Pichu, which are kind of liabilities with Greninja. Zeraora is a little bit different, right? I actually think it's really, really good this season into Suicune. So shout out to Raikou and Tapu Koko. We call it Raikoko, is what I call it. Maybe some people have different names for the deck, but I love this deck. I really do. One of my all-time favorites. Next up, though, is Dragonite. We've talked about Dragonite, I feel like, for the last 2 or 3 weeks. For whatever the reason, honestly, Dragonite is just an exceptional Pokemon. I think it really just comes down to the fact that the other strongest decks of the format are late-game decks. And the other most common decks, like Giratina, Darkrai, and Guzzlord, don't appreciate just getting 1-hit KO'd by 180 HP Pokemon. The strategy with Dragonite is pure high roll. It really is just a late-game, just strong deck that, if it gets set up, good luck. But if it doesn't, then, you're going to lose, right? It's just one of those deck lists. And some people like decks like this. The upside to playing Dragonite is that the format right now isn't as fast as previous formats were. So taking 3 or 4 turns to get a Dragonite setup actually ends up being okay in a unique way this season, where I think as previous seasons, it really wasn't the case. We saw other rare candy decks, but they were like Charizard or Solgaleo or Garchomp, which were able to deal damage as soon as they rare candied. Dragonite oftentimes is really just kind of struggling to get all the pieces together, but once it does, it's probably going to win the game. This Draco Meteor Dragonite has thrown me for an absolute loop. I always, when I play this deck list, expect to deal with Dragonite EX. But sometimes they evolve into this Dragonite, the non-EX one, and it becomes just an absolute cinematic moment where it's they're just hitting with Draco Meteors, and we're just trying to not, get absolutely RNG rolled by Draco Meteor. It's a hilarious card. I think this card is super inconsistent. Last night on stream, we actually had one of our Mantykes get hit for 200 damage from Draco Meteor, and it soaked up every single one of them, and it allowed us to win the game. It was really, really funny. Sylveon. I think that most Dragonite decks probably right now should be playing Sylveon. I think it's just better than the Cleffa version, although I don't think they're that different. This deck list here is playing only Pichu, so it's playing only water energies. People ask me that all of the time. Should we play 2 different baby Pokemon like Mantyke and Pichu, and should we play double energies? Should we play a single energy type and a single baby Pokemon? Should we play Cleffa or Sylveon? It really depends. Dragonite is a deck list that is a bit of an enigma. It's hard to really put our finger on what the best way to play it is. I prefer this version. This is the deck that got 3rd at the Pocket Mats tournament a couple of weeks ago with Sylveon with a single baby and a single energy type. I think that it's the most consistent way to play Dragonite, but it really just comes down to preference. And at the end of the day, all we need to do is just get those 3 energies on Dragonite and get it evolved, right? And we're probably going to do okay. A really fun deck, a really strong deck list. I don't have anything else to say about it other than that it doesn't care. It doesn't care what it goes up against, I would say Silvally is one of those unique things that this Dragonite deck can struggle with, just because, the way it works, right, is if you with Dragonite, you really take advantage of being able to take 2-hit KOs or just 2 KOs and then winning the game. And that requires you to KO an EX Pokemon, right? But against Silvally, if you're able to get double Silvallies on the board, even if they get that first attack off and KO, you're one of your Silvallies, you can go to a second Silvally and then attack, and then, also have a Giratina on the back line or a Zeraora or something like that, right? So the Silvally decks, I would say, are actually probably the strongest decks into Dragonite, but it's not like Silvally's everywhere in the format, right? And most decks are playing EX Pokemon. Dragonite is crazy. It's just a crazy deck. I'm happy that a pure high roll deck ended up actually being somewhat viable, and for that deck to be Dragonite is actually pretty funny. I know, it's so crazy to me, right? Because on one end, people really are tired of this metagame, but on the other thing, we have tons of different crazy decks that are good, right? We have Skarmory, we have Dragonite. These are meta viable decks right now, which I think a lot of people have been waiting for a long time. So it's a little bit ironic, right? In the same vein that the format started in a way that everybody hated, but then has really ended up in a way that a lot of people were kind of hoping for a long time. It really has turned into a metagame that I think is really quite slept on. I don't know how else to say that. I'm not really thinking that a bunch of people are gonna, hop back in and start grinding in this last week of the Secluded Spring season. But no, I think the metagame right now is about as good as I can kind of remember it. It feels a lot more similar to the previous 2 metagames, which I think a lot of people were a bit more high on. But anyway, Dragonite is viable. It's actually quite good. So yeah, it's gotta be on the list today. Similar to Dragonite is Flareon. It's the other high roll deck of the format. We call this type of deck Turbo, right? So the reason we call this Turbo Flareon, or I call it Turbo Flareon, is just because of Magby, right? So the baby Pokemon are used in Turbo strategies primarily. I mean, we see them in Dragonite just to get that extra energy type on, but most decks are playing baby Pokemon just so that they can attack on turn 2 with a Pokemon that otherwise would only be able to attack on turn 3. And that inherently gives a lot of different decks enough value, enough potential to be meta viable deck lists. And I think that Flareon is a great example of that, right? The 2 EV bag, the 2 red, able to one-hit KO basically everything in the game. Magby just allows us to attack with Flareon on our second turn. And that's enough for this deck list to be broken. A consistently high win rate deck. I would say this has been a top 5 deck the entire season. It's a fire deck, but for whatever the reason, it's strong into Suicune. I say whatever for whatever the reason, but really it's just for that fact that we can one-hit KO all of their Pokemon. Yeah, Flareon is exceedingly good, and we can just tack in the Genetic Apex Flareon to deal with Oricorios quite well. It's a really strong deck. And again, it's a bit of a high roll deck. It's a bit of an RNG deck. Sometimes your deck does nothing. Sometimes it absolutely blitzes through your opponent. I know when I match up against Flareon, I'm always a little bit kind of scared about it, because I'm all right, let's see if they get it. You know what I mean? It's one of those types of decks similar to Dragonite, but definitely still a valuable option, and definitely a strong choice if you're looking to climb on the ranked ladder, honestly. If you play enough games with Flareon, you're going to go on win streaks, you know what I mean? It's a bit of a linear deck list, but definitely a good one. Doesn't really care what its matchups are that much, I would say, and takes advantage of those opportunities pretty well, specifically to Suicune, right? So shout out to Flareon. I remember when people, when Flareon was announced, people were like, this card's not good, and I just kept telling people, you're absolutely crazy. Flareon is good. It's actually seen really successful meta play in 2 different deck lists, which I think is unique, right? Before with Leafeon and then now with Magby. Now, unfortunately, I think a lot of people liked the Flareon version better as a more consistent mid-game sort of tempo-based deck list, but I think that the Turbo Flareon deck in general just is better, and I think it's more well-positioned. So, rest in peace to the Leafeon Flareon deck list, but Flareon lives on. It's a very strong Pokemon. Definitely deserves to be mentioned in today's video. Next up is going to be Guzzlord, right? So, it's Guzzlord, guys. I mean, come on now. A strong Suicune matchup, a strong Giratina Darkrai matchup, and quite frankly, it's a deck list that, loves to just flip coins all game, and if you flip a bunch of heads, you're probably going to win. If you don't flip any heads, you're probably going to lose. That's the life of a Guzzlord player. I like Guzzlord, actually. I think that it's a pretty unique deck list, and Guzzlord's one of those Pokemon that I think will continue to be strong. I just don't know if there's really any way to counterplay Guzzlord other than playing grass decks, right? And as long as grass decks aren't exceedingly popular in the metagame, Guzzlord will be a meta staple, right? It's just that type of a card. I have nothing else to say about it. I think everybody understands Guzzlord. It won the Pocket Mats tournament a couple of weeks ago and has been, a meta staple. It's been placing well in tournaments ever since. It's a deck I still see on the ranked ladder from time to time. To be fair, I think Silvally also does fairly well, into Guzzlord. And in general, I think there's a lot of different decks that can do good into Guzzlord. Dragonite specifically is one of them. Turbo Flareon can 1-hit KO you. Those are definitely two matchups that Guzzlord probably doesn't love running into. Yeah, I think it's kind of survived based off of its Suicune matchup, even though it's not nearly as strong as it was, earlier on in the season when it kind of emerged as, the primary counterplay to Suicune. I think that honestly, if I had to really chalk down this metagame into a couple of different things, I would say that a big reason why people got kind of annoyed by the Suicune stuff was early on they really assumed that you had to play Guzzlord or Giratina Darkrai if you wanted to beat Suicune. And I think that gave people the wrong impression of the metagame because that's not really what it is at all, at least at this point. But going into that second week, it really felt like the counter meta just was Guzzlord or Giratina Darkrai, and people probably didn't really love that. But that's not the case anymore. Guzzlord's still a strong option, but there's a lot of other options to, to deal with Suicune. And I say that this whole video, but like if you play on the ranked ladder, like most of your games are not going to be against Suicune, I say that, but maybe they will be mostly Suicune. It's definitely still a popular deck, but I would say, probably about 20 to 30% of your games are going to be against Suicune, which is a lot. That's a lot, but it's not like all of your games, right? Yeah, there's Guzzlord, guys. Nothing has really changed about the deck either. So, I just have to mention it because it's still a strong option, but it's not like there's any like major update here to Guzzlord. It's Guzzlord. It's the control version. The poison version is not as good. The aggro Naganadel version, just play straight Guzzlord specifically because it's better in this weekend. So there you go. We're going to end this video on the weekly wild card. This isn't going to be, well, it's kind of a wild card. It's more proven now than maybe some of the other wild cards have been in the past, but anyway, the weekly wildcard is a deck list that I necessarily don't feel like as solidified in my opinions about, but definitely has been performing exceedingly well over the last few days or over the last week, right? So the wildcard this week is going to be Decidueye. We've talked about this actually a couple of days ago. Decidueye is another deck list that can survive on basically having a single Pokemon in the active spot. With Erika's, with Lily, with Leaf Cape, really all this deck list has to worry about is finding its evolution Pokemon and drawing into the Pokemon it needs to. That's genuinely the only thing that Decidueye has to worry about. If you do get that Decidueye on your board by turn 2, or sometimes even turn 3, it can kind of just sweep through your opponent. There's really not much that many decks in the format can do right now, other than maybe, some of the turbo fire decks like Flareon and Charizard if you end up going up against Charizard, but most decks actually kind of get completely thrown to the wayside by Decidueye. Suicune can only hit it for, 60 damage, 80 at the most with Greninja, and again, we are playing 2 copies of Lily, 2 Erika, and Leaf Cape, which brings us to 200 HP, and we just hit for 80 and then 100, and the cool thing about playing straight Decidueye is that we can play all of these healing cards because we don't have to play Cyrus, right? Because of the Pierce the Pain attack, one of the strongest attacks in the entire game, allowing you to deal 100 damage to your opponent's bench Pokemon or the active, it really doesn't matter. Decidueye is a really, really, really strong Pokemon. I think that the only reason Decidueye never really was able to interject itself into the metagame in the previous few seasons is because of the prevalence of things like, Charizard and Incineroar and then Flareon. At this point, I think Flareon is definitely a fairly common deck list, but it's not nearly as common as a lot of the other things that you'll face. Decidueye is uniquely well positioned in the current metagame. Again, I think that at this point, a lot of different decks have shown their face to be quite strong into Suicune, and I think that that's a unique aspect, right? Honestly, at the end of the seasons, people genuinely kind of fade away. They stop playing and they wait for the new set to come out. But in my mind, this last week, the 3rd into the 4th week, is actually the most fun times in Pokemon Pocket because it really is like an anything goes type of a time period where a lot of decks just really sort of pop up and they end up doing really well. It's a really unique time period to be playing Pokemon Pocket. So I know for all of you players that are still watching this video who are still playing Pokemon Pocket casually or grinding on the ranked battles, I think that the metagame is actually quite fun right now. But anyway, I assume most people probably aren't that interested in ranked battles right now. Our channel is all about the competitive aspect of Pokemon Pocket, and people every day comment that this game is all RNG. It doesn't really matter what goes on. It's not a competitive game. To be fair, like, yes, it's a TCG game. These are 20 card decks. The games last 5 to 10 minutes. There's a lot of RNG involved. We can't deny that. But what I say every day, or almost every day, the main skill gap in Pokemon Pocket, the real way to show your talent or your skill with the game is not necessarily in playing the matches, but in playing the particular cards that you need to win the game, right? Most games are determined before the game begins, and I know some people aren't going to love that. It definitely is a game that, you know, doesn't require like your utmost attention, right? Like a lot of games do just come down to whether you draw the cards or not. But playing the right cards, playing the right deck is what really matters. And that's why this channel exists. This channel exists not only to showcase you guys, you know, all of the new strategies, all of the new cards whenever the new sets come out, but to make sure that you're playing the correct 20 card list to give you the best chance possible to win your games, right? And you gotta have to just sort of let go of that, right? When I play Pokemon Pocket, I know that I'm gonna win games and I'm gonna lose games, sometimes entirely off of RNG. But I know that I have control over the cards that I'm playing and the decks that I'm playing right now, or anytime for that matter. And that to me is the real fun for Pokemon Pocket. So anyway, guys, there it is. That's the video. Shout out to Decidueye. It's our wild card for the week and actually a very well-positioned deck list. It's done exceedingly well in online competitions over the last few days. And I think in ranked battles, it's probably going to also be a pretty strong choice. So that is why it is the wild card for the week. Listen, you know, again, whatever your opinions are about this metagame, we have Dragonite in the meta. We have Skarmory. We have Decidueye. We have Silvally, we have all of these different lightning type decks. You know, yes, there's Giratina Darkrai, yes, there's Guzzlord, yes, there's Suicune, but there's so many other strong decks right now that I actually feel like this metagame is as balanced as we've really ever had, and I find that to be really, really interesting. Yes, it's going to be heavily dominated from a meta share perspective towards Suicune, but that's nothing new in the past, right? Giratina Darkrai used to be 25% meta share, and other deck lists and other metagames have been, you know, of course, very high in meta share, but things are definitely balancing out. I'm having a good time with it. We've been live streaming more, and it's definitely a pretty good time. So yeah, that being said, I am looking forward to the next season for sure, and you guys are going to want to stay tuned because whatever update comes out for Pokemon Pocket, whatever news we get, we're going to cover it here on the channel. We're going to break it all down, and I'm really, really excited. So there we go, guys. Yeah, I'm going to be live streaming a lot more often, at least I'm trying to. So, you know, definitely go check out the Twitch, link will be down in the description below. Go check out, well, of course, the YouTube, subscribe to the channel because we also go live on YouTube as well. But yeah, next season, I'm going to try to live stream more a lot for sure, but I'm also going to try to make a real run at like a top 1,000, you know, placement on the rank ladder. I'm going to try to play more than I typically have, at least, right? We're going to really, really grind. So it should be fun. We'll see. But anyway, there it is, guys. There's the video. Hopefully you guys have a great weekend. Go ahead and play in some of the online tournaments that are happening this weekend. I definitely would recommend it. Like I said, next week we should get some news on the next expansion, which I'm really excited about. But for now, guys, good luck on your grind. Hopefully these decks work out for you. Comment down below if anything we did not mention in today's video is working really well for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get out of here, guys. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.